terms of the overall flavor of the presentation, well, I saw one or two quotes, in the piece, and I just laughed that, well, he knows, the stature of that platform, and, he made the effort yesterday to present something that is, educated, and that is detailed and has an intellectual flavor. And I think that, that his paper, should be widely published because it will remain a reference point when hereafter we attempt an assessment of the conduct of the elections, because what he did basically was to lay out his cards on the table and to say, this is where we are. Yes, there are challenges, but the prospects are promising.
Absolutely. Very well. Thank you so much, Doctor. I will just add a few things because you've described and analyzed his appearance at Chatham House in such a detailed way. Like you mentioned, three things that stood out for me were his what he said about security, diaspora voting, and also vote buying, like you mentioned, election financing. He talked about the technology, and it's something that we've talked about a number of times on the show with regards to deployment of technology in the use of, during electioneering and election period by INEC. And this is something that he highlighted quite in detail at Chatham House yesterday. It was a robust presentation, and he was able to perhaps inspire confidence in Nigerians as to the readiness of INEC towards elections 2023, coming up in 38 days on the 25th of February, and the gubernatorial and State House of Assembly on the 11th of March. With regards to diaspora voting, this is something that has come up a number of times, and of course, it was in London. So you'd imagine that that question would come up again from Nigerians who live abroad. And he hasn't hidden his stance on this. He's very much in favor of that. Indeed, in March 2022, a bill was before the House, the National Assembly, to consider diaspora voting through an amendment of the Constitution, which was, unfortunately, was voted out in second reading. However, he had said that he will continue to push this. We cannot make a case enough for that, especially in regards to the fact that the diaspora community contribute quite significantly to the Nigerian economy. As at 2021, the World Bank had posted about $17 billion as diaspora remittances. In 2021, it was a lot more. In 2009, it was a lot more than that. However, we also talk about the number of population of Nigerians abroad, where the United Nations puts the figure of legal migrants as at 2020 at 1.7 million. Of course, if we're to consider the unrecognized in terms of those who are illegally abroad, it would probably be double that number. So just bringing up that case around diaspora voting again and its significance, especially for Nigerians who live abroad and contribute, significantly to the economy. Beyond that, he assured Nigerians, like Dr. Bati had mentioned, of how they're working with multiple stakeholders to ensure that they secure the next election. He talked about the technology tool, EVMAT, the election violence mitigation and advocacy tool. Now, he's mentioned that this tool is a research tool to mitigate potential security risks and to be able to deal with them. And this is quite commendable in terms of the fact that they're not just going to be reactionary; they're also going to be looking ahead and potentially identify areas of risk. So these are some of the things he addressed. But very importantly, just to round off this, is to talk about the fact that the date remains sacrosanct. Keep the reassurance to Nigerians that come February 25, elections will hold, and that despite the fact that 50 INEC buildings have come under attack in the last 4 years, they are rebuilding and they are ready to ensure that elections hold in February and in March. Well, Nigeria's Finance Minister, Dr. Zainab Ahmed, says she does not feel betrayed by the Buhari administration for not following through on a 2021 projection that fuel subsidies will be removed in June of 2022. She spoke to Rise business correspondent Rotu Sodiri in Davos, Switzerland, at the ongoing 2023 World Economic Forum.
In Davos, Switzerland, we are honored to be joined by Nigeria's Minister of Finance, Dr. Zainab Ahmed. Thank you so much, Minister, for joining us. Really glad to have you with us. Minister, starting globally, there's a lot of talk about a recession in 2023. do you buy into that? Do you think that that is what is going to happen and it's on the cards this year?
Well, first of all, let me thank you, Ojeri, for having me at Arise TV here in Davos today. On your question, it is quite likely that there will be a global recession. From the reports we've seen from the World Bank and the IMF and other forecasts, that there will be a global recession. How it will infect the globe, of course, will be different from sub-region to sub-region. But clearly, there's going to be declining growth on a general basis. Even China, the last time that we had a global recession, China didn't witness any growth, but even China is projected to see a reduction in growth. And why are we having this declining growth? Is because of the sustained economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've seen the resurgence of COVID-19 in some developed economies, especially China, but also the effect of the Russia-Ukraine war that is having a global impact. The quantitative easing that is being implemented by central banks across the world also contributes to high cost of interest, resulting in high inflation rates, which means people's spending power is weakened as a result. So there are all indications that there will be a global recession.
Now, Minister, back in 2008, when there was a global recession, Nigeria's FX reserves were in excess of $60 billion, and the country was able to withstand the impact of that recession. Looking at 2023, do you think Nigeria is vulnerable to external shocks?
So it is true we had higher reserves during the first global recession. Our reserves are now at 34, so that is still a healthy level. It means we're able to meet at least 6 months of imports and other expenses into the country. It means we can withstand another global shock if we're able to carry through a coordinated response between the monetary, fiscal, as well as trade authorities. We have learned a lot from the experience that we went through during the COVID, and it showed that when we plan as one, we can actually withstand the shocks. If you recall that the Nigerian economy did go into recession during the COVID, where it was a short-lived one because of that coordinated response, which had not just government, but also private sector contributing to the effort. We also had at that time been able to scale back on some categories of government spending to enable us invest more in the healthcare sector. So with the right policies, we can weather another global recession.
Exactly 7 days ago today, back on January the 10th, Arise TV and KPMG had a special broadcast, Budget Day, where we looked in depth at the 2023 budget. Minister, do you feel, or rather, what is your response to those who say that the revenue projections of over 10 trillion for 2023 are too optimistic?
Well, I will say that if they look at the numbers, the performance of the 2022 budget, you will see that the oil and gas sector contribution was about 35%, while the non-oil sector had the largest contribution. But not only that, the non-oil sector contribution outperformed the budget by a very large proportion. For example, company income tax outperformed the budget by 158%. So there are some foundational measures that have been taken that has enabled non-oil sector revenue to grow on a consistent basis, and not just by a little bit, but quite significantly. And secondly, the oil sector's contribution that was minimal in 2022 is looking good to pick up in 2023. The measures that the government has taken, a combined effort of security and intelligence agencies' work, have resulted in improved production from the oil and gas sector, and it looks like it will continue as well. Most of the fields that were previously not producing at the levels that it's supposed to produce can now produce at maximum capacity. And also the oil price in the international market is still at a very reasonably high level. and we're doing a lot to encourage investments in gas, so there will be new and additional incremental streams that will come also from the gas sector. So we should be able to meet this. There's also, we introduced some new excise duties and some taxes, the full effect of which we will see in 2023.
Okay, so that's revenue. On the debt side, debt service to revenue in 2022 was about 80%. We have a deficit for 2023 that's over 10 trillion naira. Do you think Nigeria can have impactful, meaningful economic growth with numbers like that?
There can be, and there should be, and as a matter of fact, there must be. We have to improve on our revenue so that that revenue to debt service ratio improves. Again, we have had to borrow to be able to invest in infrastructure. When this administration started, we had an infrastructure stock of about 22%. We've been able to move that to 35%. These are investments that are required to grow the economy on a sustainable basis. Also, we've been faced with 2 recessions, and we took expansionary stand to spend our way out of recession, because you cannot just contemplate what will happen for Nigeria to have an extended period of recession. So we will be able to increase the revenue performance in 2022, and that means we'll be able to reduce the debt service to revenue ratio. We also have to exit fuel subsidy, because that is also a very significant contributory factor. You can look at it in 2 ways. It's revenue that will have come to government, but it doesn't, because it's been spent on fuel subsidy. But also, where there is not enough revenue for government to buy the refined petroleum products, we have to borrow to buy the petroleum products. So if we take that out, that's about 3.25 trillion. That is a significant relief that we don't incur any more than that number that we projected for in 2022.
Minister, I'm glad you mentioned fuel subsidies. You have repeatedly warned of the impact of fuel subsidies on our fiscal structure. You've been on several platforms saying that fuel subsidies have to be removed. You put yourself on the line back in 2021 when you said fuel subsidies were removed by June of 2022. Do you feel betrayed by the administration that they didn't follow through on that promise?
No, betrayed, no. It was a decision that was taken as a collective, recognizing the fact that due to the lingering impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and also heightened inflation, that removal of the fuel subsidy at that time will have increased more burden on the citizen. And the president does not want to contemplate a situation where measures are taken that is further going to burden the citizens. So the decision was to extend the period from June 2022 to 18 months, beginning from January 2022. So in June 2023, we should be able to exit. The good thing is we hear a consistent message that everybody is saying this thing needs to go. It's not serving the majority of Nigerians. I listened to even some of the new leaders that are campaigning for the next round of leadership in the country that are saying they will get rid of it very, very quickly.
We have another administration coming in, another promise to remove fuel subsidies in June of 2023. Do you think that will happen?
What will be safer is for the current administration to maybe at the beginning of the second quarter to start removing the fuel subsidy, because it's more expedient if you remove it gradually than to wait and remove it all in one big hug. So the idea for us in the budget is that the subsidy cost should not exceed that 3.23 trillion. So whether it's done completely 100% by June or by July or whatever, it's the process, and then the cost is capped.
Final question for you, Minister. At the budget breakdown in Abuja, which you presided over, you made it a point to welcome ladies and gentlemen of the press. And you made an interesting comment where you said that you are still querying the fact that when journalists are gathered together, they're only referred to as gentlemen of the press. And we noted it on Arise TV that you made that comment. Do you think, Minister, that gender diversity has made any progress from your vantage point?
Well, that's interesting, and thank you for recognizing that. So for me, the intention is that we need to, as leaders, everywhere we have the opportunity, call to attention that there's a need for gender parity. You saw the unfortunate incident where there was an attempt to make some provision that will have favored gender parity in the Constitution, and it failed. So we have to use every opportunity that we have to speak to these issues, whether it is the press, ladies and gentlemen in the press, or any other mix of people. We have taken measures in the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning to include a gender lens, not only in our the medium-term national development plan, but also in our budgets. And we have designed a framework to enable us track the performance of those commitments using reporting by emphasizing disaggregated data. We need to look at whatever sector, whatever policy we undertake, we need to keep asking, how does it affect women? Because that's 50% of the population. You cannot grow and bridge the SDG gaps if you are not taking care and bringing along 50% of the population of our country.
Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Dr. Zainab Ahmed, I want to thank you very much for speaking to Arise TV here in Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum 2023. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning.
Well, that was a good interview. Thank you, Rotus, for engaging the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning and speaking against the backdrop of projections that the world is heading towards a global recession. We'll continue conversations and discussions around the World Economic Forum in Davos in the course of the show as well as in the coming days. Well, that's all on the news headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Michael Wilson to give us updates on global business activities. Stay with us.